So Johannes, thank you very much for writing the pieces. Thank you very much for cooperating with us. We are very happy to have had the opportunity to work on that pieces.
My pleasure.
My first question, pieces as process is a big topic of this project. And your pieces also are concentrating rather more on process than in the end effect. What would you say to that?
No, I would not say that the final result would be less important than the process, but for just such a piece, the process is very, very crucial and is a bit special compared to writing a score where every detail is already defined, and then the ensemble just needs to practice and rehearse until the score is realized as the composer thought it should be.
I think your piece points into direction of even more dialogue between composer and performer. So it's not only like it was before, composer would write a piece, then meet performer, and now you play it, but it's big dialogue with performer, and performer's role is actually almost equal to the composer, because in a way he has to compose the piece as well. What would you say to that?
Yeah, or I would first of all say that it is about giving a lot of responsibility. Freedom and responsibility is a pair, as always. And here in this case, it's a offer, so to speak, to go much more into the role of the composer for the performers. And what I'm interested then is that it's becoming a very individual interpretation, very, very individual. So every interpretation of such pieces would be very, very different, and therefore it's much more really a connection between composer and performer.
Yeah. Aren't you, like many critics probably would say that, how aren't you scared, or how aren't you fearing results, and how are you able to give that much freedom to the performer?
Yeah, to be very totally frank about this, is that I often discuss with my students when they give freedom to performers. I ask them, but why are you doing that? You are the composer. Are you not able to think yourself of a very good rhythm or good pitches or whatever and good sounds? Isn't that your job? And yeah, but then I'm also interested in go against my own opinions and principles, and thus in this case then going very extremely into that. Yeah, but still it is important that the audience has somehow an awareness of who is playing which role, and therefore in my piece it was important, for example, to show the score, to show the instructions, so that the roles and the responsibility is also clear. But then I'm just very interested in how a very individual approach of performers can take place. And yeah, and I think it's such a difference when you look into more theater practice, where actors are much more really identifying themselves with the role they are playing. Whereas sometimes, yeah, in your music, you see players, yeah, they have the notes and they're playing, trying to make everything okay, but it's a job. Yeah, they're fulfilling the job and do not really know about the whole thing. Yeah, and that's a pity. I think there is much more energy when performers really identify themselves with what they're playing and with the whole piece, and that's what I'm looking for at the moment. And therefore one one study, or however we would call it, was in this case these kind of pieces where I really try to give them the possibility to identify, to really adopt the piece.
This is something which I must say personally I appreciate a lot, because as you said, yeah, it's obvious how the scene looks, and very often one has this, musicians who are trying to give their best to realize the scores which they get, and there it ends. And this is the famous thing with which we try to fight also as Delirium, what I call, two rehearsals plus concert performers, where you get the score, we all know what to do, we are all fantastic, done. And this is, for me personally, it's a little bit far from really artistic, from art, from what I would call art and describe as an artist, because the performer loses this role of performance, really. But as you said, this is really responsibility, and this dialogue is important. And I think this dialogue could go even farther in future. And do you think is it important direction for future now? Where this even more looking for even more relationship between composers and performers?
Yes, since this model of creating a score is somehow now the basis since decades, and leads to this kind of assembly line production, as you describe it as well, to rehearsals and the concert. And that's not, but I see that it is not always satisfying. And we get a better result, if speaking from a composer's perspective, if one really tries to get the best out of performers, yeah, and which is very individual skills and how they work together, and therefore there's much more the space for individuality of very specific realizations of pieces. It's the same with when I have ensemble pieces with a very defined score, but more and more with pieces that are played more than once, then in rehearsal I start to change things, because I see the situation is different, the players are different, so the pieces are still in kind of, they're not just not finished. I see also with really written scores, and therefore I'm looking for other possibilities at the moment, how pieces can at all get to life.
It makes me think about Miles Davis, who used to visit many concerts with Stockhausen, Nono, and so on. And even in his biography, he writes that he really liked the music, but he thought it's too robotic because there is no enough space for creativity for performer later. So he thought you are really creative and really performer if you improvise or create. And actually, in a way, you give space for this. And for me, it's also very close to Delirium and our name, because Delirium comes from this sensual experience, from this ecstasy of bringing the experience. And again, thank you for giving this to us.
Yes, my pleasure. It is really, and I must say, in this extremeness, rather a new field for me, and I was really happy to have this opportunity to try this out for the first time, and maybe it can be developed.
My next question, which is actually also connected to your pieces, something I find very important personally. One can see, this is of course not a new direction, but I think it's becoming more and more important, is the performance art entering music even more and more and more. And I think it has also a little bit to do with your pieces, because while we were preparing this project, and as you've seen, your students also brought pieces which went direction performance rather. I mean, piece of Raphael or Oliver, they were really actually performance pieces, and it makes me think also about what Abramovich said, that what's the difference between performance and theater, that in performance the knife is real, and the blood is real, and the same here, connection with creativity and so on, and where you have to bring yourself. How important do you think performance will be for development of music and new forms and new concert forms and so on?
Yeah, very often following principles or ideas which are more of performance art than, say, acting, yeah? Because this, for instance, trying just to show emotions or feelings does work less and less well. Yeah, because that's so much already occupied from Hollywood and so on, and it's also standardized, yeah, and full of cliches also. Whereas the reality, yeah, this just this matter of not showing emotions but creating emotions, yeah, or creating reactions, recreating a situation. That's for me what performance art is. And of course, this has a lot to do with strategies of having a really a physical reality or of a psychological. Yeah, but it's but I think mainly it's a physical reality of, say, have made lots of pieces with where I'm using gravity, for instance, as a really a physical reality, yeah, often then combined with the body, yeah, or as challenges for performers, to give a very individual and hands-on, not something they have to just to kind of show, to realize somehow, but to put themselves on really on the stage in the foreground and give their very individual solution for whatever task.
So maybe now some questions which are connected more with mission of Delirium in general as whole organization. So one of our primary missions is we believe, and I also personally believe that what we are doing nowadays, I'm even scared of using definitions, because, as you know, using contemporary art or modern art or whatever is all not really. That's why we use actually this ambiguity with tomorrow's art to get away from that definitions and so on. And we absolutely believe that this is for everybody. So you don't have to be specialized, public or whatever. You don't have to read PhDs or whatever on the subject. All you need is to have context from now, to be alive now, and so on. And of course, there are different levels of interpretation what one seeks, but we believe that this is for most of people interested in arts and looking for something. And we believe you can reach even more public through searching with every project for new forms, because I think personally that the old 20th century form, which where artists come to the stage, bow, get applause, of course, and leave, which is actually even historically funny, because if you look throughout history, even then it's not really valid. Doesn't work for public of 21st century, and it definitely not for public of future, which needs more and more interaction, this game play and so on. So my question number one, do you also think that arts have potential to be really wide, to be for brighter public and so on? Number two, do you think also that the way would be to search always for new forms and so on? And three, do you think also that this interaction, that this interactivity with people, a little bit this game feeling during performances is one of the ways to go?
Yes, I agree mostly with this. I mean, I can also understand to having this what is called a traditional form of having a stage in front and the pieces realized. That's not something totally bad and something to get rid of. There's formats and there's concepts and ideas where this makes sense, but let's call it it's one option besides other options. And but of course in the arts we should always look for also for other options, or see which option is really appropriate for a specific concept. And yeah, and also it's always should be a task to find more of audience than only 20 or 30 experts. It is for some things fine when it's, and in the beginning it is 20 or 30 experts, and it's it is difficult things and which is hard to understand. This is also legitimate and should be the space for really trying out very difficult things. But things are connected also. I think in chemistry you might be as an expert for very special combinations of atoms, however, and this might later lead to a product which can be then spread and sold all over the world. So the things are connected, and the first tryouts in electronic music led decades later to techno music listened to all over the world. And does not necessarily take decades until something spreads all over. Ideally, it would be possible to get somehow both from me. I mean, I've of course make pieces where there's only 20 or 30 experts in the concert, and it is difficult to understand. But I also once made a conceptual piece about financial crisis, which was seen on YouTube more than 500,000 times. And yeah, ideally it is possible to create different pieces which can have a different amount of audience.
So the second question was the form.
Yeah, also here it is. I find it always beautiful in theater practice when there is this kind of the fall of the fourth wall, when there is a inclusion. For instance, in a music theater piece, I was in one section, there was a big destruction of violins. 100 violins were to be destroyed. And then the audience was also invited to take part in this mass destruction orgy. Which, and for example, a moment I liked very much, especially was, okay, there was this mass destruction and the audience was really very eager to take part. Oh yeah, I also want a violin. And then later in the piece, the stage was full with these fragments of violins, and the piece went on for another 3 hours. Was a very long piece. And then later, during a longer video, people climbed on stage and started to take the nice looking fragments of violins. So again, they just entered the stage, became part of the piece, although that was not planned by me. But I really like this, that people start to just enter the stage. Yeah. So generally, it's nice and beautiful to get at all the audience somehow active, which is hard enough. But again and again, I'm also trying out these kind of things. Yeah, maybe call it, but I would not call it a game situation, because game is for me a bit too not serious enough. I do not like to. I'm trying to avoid saying that we play something. It's for me it is existential, and or it's simply again a matter of, it is a reality. It is now in the moment something is happening, and I'm trying not to call it something with game or play, but I understand what you mean. There's kind of interactivity and openness. No, the end really, it's things can happen which were not planned.
In respect to everything what we talked about, a little bit hard question, but especially also in respect to your pieces and giving this much freedom and so on. Who is composer for you in 21st century?
Well, I always said that as somebody who creates things, you of course always use things that were already created. Yeah? There's no creation out of nothing. You always stand on the shoulders of giants, and you're using so much. That's what I used to call music with music. I'm always making music with music. Music consists of other music. Music is made out of other music, always in a way. And things are made of other things. And therefore it is always, the work is a network. Yeah, it's we are all connected, and therefore it is quite doubtful to speak of an individual creator of something. although people do specialize, that's also a fact, and this is important in our society, that people do specialize in creating, in aesthetics, in very specific fields. For instance, my colleague Caspar Johannes Walter is super specialized in micro-interval music and has such a big knowledge about this, and there's also such a special imagination with these things. That's of course also part of it. Yeah, but it is different parts, different kind of knots that create a network. And I'm interested, or it's just a matter of fact that we are working in networks. The work is a network.
Johannes, last question. Subject which is dear to my heart, and I know to yours as well. Applause. What about this applause?
Yes, I do not prefer applause for several reasons. On the one hand is that it is just defining now the beginning and end of a piece, and I do often not like these boundaries. Then it is also an immediate judgment, yeah, with applause immediate 10 seconds after the last sound, the audience now tells me if it was good or bad. And I think that's just a very too quick response, and artists then do fear this immediate judgment, and therefore are not are too shy to try things out. So we should get rid of this immediate judgment. And there's also a lot of pieces where applause just doesn't make sense because it creates such a mass behavior, say, of cheering or something, of almost yeah, such a conformistic behavior of the masses, whereas a piece is much more subtle, much more, say, existential. It has a very serious topic or whatever. Yeah, but very often applause just doesn't make sense. But it is such a hundreds of years long tradition that is, of course, very hard to fight it. And sometimes I do, but not always. Yeah, because you would always have to explain people, yeah, really to kind of introduce another way of making a concert, and it's quite a big task to fight this long tradition. Yes. But I'm very glad that more and more I have this opinion since I think I started to expose this in 2015, and more since then I meet more and more people who agree with me, and to yeah, and try also to think of alternatives, yeah, or try to do without. I'm very happy that I see more and more people thinking similar.
What you just said about immediate judgment, this is funny thought, because now I just thought, like, you don't do this with paintings, isn't it? Like, no one really applauds a painting or something. This immediate judgment is just there for music, and this is also something I talked about with Oliver during our talk now, that there are I mean, applause is just one of many things which one does, you know, like the standards of song, and there are so many, and one usually doesn't really think about them, like you know, all these boundaries and all these standards about how concert ought to look like, or whatever. And I don't know, me myself, for example, I don't like the word concert itself anymore, even, because I think with search of these all new forms, it's not anymore valid. It's concert is for me only music. It somehow cuts all these other layers and so on. And how do you think could one work with for future to get rid of the standards? Because of course one cannot force people to anything, and of course this is also not the aim. However, I think it's important to show people where these things come from and what they actually mean, because I think one is used to this idea which is actually perpetually spread around cultural institutions where they teach you even as a child, right? You go for a young people's concert to the Philharmonie and they tell you now you have to applaud or don't applaud between the parts or whatever, right? It takes whole this spontaneity and everything out of the equation and so on, and you are learning what you ought to be doing. How do you think can one follow up with these ideas for future? You know, how could one get rid of this misunderstood standards?
Yeah, I think it's also good to think about even the term concert itself. We could call it more of an event, a situation, something, a specific, or another atmosphere is created. Also, say situation or event. I like these two words especially.
How about performance?
Yes, or performance, rendition or rendering could always also speak of, yeah. Yeah, there is also a more abstract an event. Yeah, and therefore, I mean, there's very basic things one can alter, for instance, to put the seats somehow that people can stand up, yeah, and are able also to go out for 5 minutes when they want, yeah. I mean, I've made a piece that was 7 hours long without a break, which means it is kind of absolutely clear that people sooner or later will also leave the hall, at least to go to the bathroom, and so they are able to do that. Yeah, it's more of an installation or like an exhibition. They can come, but they're allowed to go or go to the bar and take a beer and come back after an hour. That's possible. Yeah, so having this kind of strategies to, of course, also it can be the situation of stage and audience kind of making it more blurry, or somehow going out of the theater on the streets and or using the internet also as a second space. And so yeah, there's various strategies to create to have a different approach of creating situations, artistic, aesthetic situations.
Johannes, not to finish yet, sorry, but you said something very interesting now, which I want to discuss, because you said internet as a second space. Why second? Because for me, you know, it's slowly also changing, especially now after this crazy pandemic time. Of course, everybody started streaming and so on and using it as a secondary medium, but I think we all forget a little bit that internet's role is also changing arts. I mean, internet becomes a venue for itself. What would you say to that?
Yeah, okay. I did say second and not secondary, so in a way, yeah, you can say it's just to not equal things, but kind of they have. I mean, I also could unfortunately not attend the concert in Basel, so I have seen it in the live stream. Yeah, and certainly this interview now takes place through Zoom. So this pandemic changes these things a lot, or boost the tendency which was there before. On the other hand, people might also be eager again to having a live a performance in a real physical space. Yeah, but both worlds are of course there and can be connected and should be connected, and we'll see in the future where yeah, documentation of course is very important nowadays, that the concert takes place or the event takes place. But after all, what remains is something documents, yeah. And I think we have all so much work with this that it is absolutely necessary and worth also having then a good documentation, which is not only a kind of a documentation, but it has its own status, yeah. It's its own aesthetic, and it is an own version, I would say, of a concert, of a piece, of an event. And yeah, we should really engage in using all these possibilities and thinking of them as their own aesthetic as having their own aesthetic.
Lovely. Johannes, thank you very much. Thank you for the talk. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Wiktor. Thanks for those good questions.